Welcome to a brand new series in the restoration industry. Gokul and I are launching a restoration masterclass, and this one is going to be on mergers and acquisitions. I am very excited to have Gokul here as the resident M&A expert. This is a huge topic in the restoration industry right now, and it seems like every week, almost daily, there are new announcements coming out about mergers and acquisitions that are happening with really big companies and really big players. So over the coming weeks and months, Gokul and I are going to be releasing a number of conversations on everything that has to do with M&A. Any questions that you might have if you are approached to sell your company, if you're thinking about selling your company, just really everything you're going to need to know. So stay tuned for a lot of episodes to come. Welcome back to another episode of the Restoration Masterclass on M&A. Today we're continuing a conversation that we started in our last episode, talking about the 6 drivers of value for a restoration company when you're talking about selling. So the first 3 that you talked about were the financials, potential growth, and the quality of the earnings in the company, right?
Correct.
Okay, so let's dive into the second 3. What are the second 3 of those 6 drivers?
So, success leaves clues, right? That's what we talked about in the previous episode. And so all great companies that are sellable have these 6 factors in them, right? So we talked about the first 3. Let's talk about the last 3 of that, right? So documenting your marketing program and your sales program. Most buyers want to know that what you're done now is going to continue post-closing. So if you can document it and show it to a potential party that, hey, here's our plan, here's how we execute it, here are the KPIs, here are the metrics, okay? The buyer, your buyer will pay you infinitely more for your business, correct? So here's a new one that's been coming up is Net Promoter Score, okay? So which basically is different from just testimonials. Okay, Net Promoter Score is how likely are your customers, okay, going to refer you to somebody that they know, correct? So if you have a high Net Promoter Score, and if you can demonstrate that, okay, it's worth a lot more to your buyers. Your business is worth a lot more. Okay, now it's a pretty new thing in our industry. Now Net Promoter Score has been around for a long time, but I would highly recommend people, if they don't have a process that collects Net Promoter Scores in every job, is to implement one, right? So there's a lot of softwares and things that can automate a lot of this. It's not a lot of block and tackle. It doesn't take a lot of resources out of your team, right? But having a Net Promoter Score absolutely tells you how well you're doing from the eyes of your customer. And if you can demonstrate a high Net Promoter Score, your business is worth a lot more to a buyer, correct?
Yes.
Now, and then let's get into teamwork and culture. Now, another topic that not a lot of people in the industry like to talk about, correct? But let me tell you from a buyer's point of view, all right? You must have a good bench strength, okay? No national buyer wants to buy a company to run it, okay? They want somebody that can take your place and run their branch or run the office for them, correct? So having bench strength absolutely matters to a buyer. And culture, okay? If you have high turnover, your business is worth less. Okay, if people are unhappy and they're leaving, it's worth less to a buyer. If you have low turnover and the culture is great and you've spent time and effort and the importance and the focus of building a great culture for your team, okay, buyers will pay up for it, right? So those are the 6 clues or the 6 factors, okay, that where companies that have them, are much more attractive to a buyer than companies that don't have them.
So I want to ask a little bit more about bench strength. A potential buyer, how are they establishing or evaluating the bench strength of a company? How do you know?
So they ask for 2 things. It starts off with, hey, can I have an org chart with 10 years and pay? So it starts there, correct? And then every buyer is going to ask you this question, okay? Who's your number 2 person and your number 3 person? Who are your key people? And I want to interview them. Correct? And a lot of times they'll interview them before we close on the business. Usually it's done about a week or 2, somewhere in there before we close on the business. So they want to talk to your key personnel. Okay? And so that conversation is probably one of the most important conversations, on your path to an exit. Okay, if that conversations go well and there's team culture there and the key people are happy and they're tenured, then it's worth more to a buyer. But if they smell trouble in that meeting, then they may even back out. Okay, so that's where this is all coming from. I think we need to pay a lot more attention to the team that we have and the culture that we're developing in our companies.
Perfect. Thank you, Gokul.
Yeah.
I can think of some companies off the top of my head right now who have some big bench strength that just had some big sales. So that's
Oh, yes.
perfect information.
Oh, yes. In the buyer's world, it's called talent acquisition. Again, that's the word. So a lot of times it's beyond the numbers. Yeah. If you got a great team, okay, they will buy it because of the team. Okay? And that's starting to happen a lot now, especially in this environment.
Yes, there are some really tough markets, right? So going into that a little bit further, this episode's going to be a little longer. Sorry, guys. Yeah. But how many companies have you seen, would you say, that are starting to buy for that talent piece? It's so impossible to find people right now, no matter what. So what does that look like?
So talent acquisition and talent audit is what they call it, where they look at what your team looks like. Next to your financials and the profit of the company is the most important thing that a buyer's looking at the moment. And I think it's going to continue to be. So here are the top 3 that they're looking at out of the 6. Your financials, right? The trends. Yep. Next, they're going to look at your bench strength or your team and the culture. Next, they're going to look at your net promoter score or your reputation. Okay, those are your top 3. If you're going to pick 3 out of the 6, that will be my top 3, right? And talent acquisition is becoming huge in our industry right now. Perfect. Yes.
Thank you, Gokul.
You're very welcome.